Here we are,
All
session two.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, so I felt really good about our last conversation. I felt like I came out of it with a better idea of what we were going for, and like things seemed like they'd been whittled down a little bit in a helpful way.
yeah.
And I spent a lot of time thinking about comps, like other
Hmm.
movies or even just like things from literature or whatever that touch on some of the ideas that we're touching on. And I usually find it really helpful to kind of like look at some of those and
Yeah,
see like, well, how does that inform what we would want to do? How does that inform what we wouldn't want to do?
totally.
Um, I added some bad comps too, like Jexy.
I don't know
As
what is Jexy? I feel like
I haven't even seen it. It's what's the main guy from Workaholics? Adam Devine.
uh,
It's him, and it's like a R-rated comedy where
oh,
he
right, about
has
the
like a Siri
right.
that's like crazy.
Yeah. I remember the train. He's like arguing if he's like the trailer from that. I remember he's like battling with his. It's yeah. It's like what was the
It's like a comedy version of her.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, um, I oftentimes find like a bad movie with similar themes and a premise can be helpful in two ways. One, it can have things to avoid, but also oftentimes like a bad movie like that will have a really simple structure and like a really distilled version of the premise that
Mm.
can sometimes like be really helpful in seeing like, hey, what is a very useful skeleton structure of this kind of a
Right.
thing,
Right.
even though all of the execution then is like not good. I
Right.
haven't seen the movie, but I have a feeling from the fact that no one has seen it,
Right.
that it might,
Word didn't spread to go watch this
yeah.
film. Right. Good. Cool. So what were some of the other comps that you kind of came up with?
All right, I got a list here. Hold on.
Cool.
Um, Somewhere. Let's see. Oh, I still have some questions too in this document. But um, so thinking about the okay, so I have I do have Jexy on this list here. There's also a Melissa McCarthy movie that came out. It got put on HBO Max, I think at like the start of the pandemic. Called Super
Oh yeah, I
Intelligence.
watched that.
Okay.
I saw it. Yeah.
That I think does have some of the like the other character that you are interacting with is just on a computer or a computer
Right. Right. Oh, actually, no, I
element
didn't see.
to
I
it.
didn't. I didn't. I didn't see Super Intelligence. I was thinking of a different Melissa
Oh,
McCarthy film
you're thinking
where she becomes a
of
superhero.
with superhero.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, I remember
these
that trailer
they
too.
seem very similar.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Thunder Force, of
Thunder
course, is
Force.
what you're thinking of.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
which I
No, I
did see
didn't.
Thunder Force. And again, this is the second comp that I haven't seen, but I remember
Right.
the trailer, and I know
Yeah.
she's like talking. It's like you can a view of her from inside a computer. I
Right.
remember,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's another like person with an AI kind of a
Yeah.
thing, and it's a comedy. Um, I think that might be an interesting one to look at. Then, of course, her
Yeah.
is probably the best of these three so far. Um, and these are all like more just sort of like a bit of the sort of like one person is a real human, the other person is a digital creation thing.
Hmm.
I have some other ones that are more like Harvey, E.T., and Ratatouille are three things that I put down
Okay.
as like a person either with like a secret helper slash imaginary friend slash like thing
Right.
they're hiding from other people. Um, Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, I just Harvey. Which one's Harvey? Oh, that's the robot.
Harvey's
No.
Jimmy Stewart, and
Oh.
has an invisible rabbit that he talks to.
Oh, okay. That's the one from.
Um,
Did you actually read the book? Because they talk about that.
Oh, I have not read the
Okay,
book
they
yet,
talk
no,
about
but
that in the book. But anyway, it's funny.
I'm I
Yeah.
did watch Harvey in film school.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
Harvey's good, and everyone thinks he's crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also like, is he crazy? And but then
Right.
there's like a one thing at the end where you're like, oh, I guess he's not. But Harvey's good, and is that kind of a thing. Ratatouille is like obviously, but we all know and love Ratatouille, but has this sort of like helper kind of a thing where this thing is helping this person accomplish their goals.
Right.
Um, and then E.T. I there's something about, we haven't discussed this, but there's something about like the like who is the what is the external villainish type force? Is there someone ultimately that you end up having to try and save or hide this creature from?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of that's the sort of I think of ET. I don't know that it's the government is after this noun, um,
Right.
but there's something interesting there. Some other things.
Well, I just want to. One thing I thought was interesting about all of those examples is that
Yeah.
the human is really the. Well, I guess ET maybe not, but like in those other, the human is like the main central
Yes.
character, and the other kind of mythical character or whatever it is
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting, but all three of those, it's interesting, are named E.T.,
Right.
Harvey, and Ratatouille,
Right. Right. So
where it
that
is like they loom large,
yeah,
but they aren't the
the
protagonist.
protagonist, which I think makes.
Go
I
ahead.
mean, I think it makes sense. I mean, obviously, it's more easily to identify with a human than with a something that's not human.
Um, yeah. Another one that I would say is like this, that's on my list where the non-human characters are the protagonists, is Monsters Inc.
Mm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's a little bit of of that, I think, in the idea we've been talking about of one, there's a sort of secret world you don't really know about.
Hmm.
Um, and then what that has too, which I think is interesting, and I wonder if there's something to that with this, is there's a set of rules in that secret world, and these characters are not following them. They
Mm.
are on a journey where they have explicitly breaking those rules.
Hmm.
Um, because we had talked before about like what makes this noun unique. How is it that what are they doing that's differentiating themselves from all the other nouns? Is this what makes this story special? So there's potentially something to like this noun is not supposed to be doing whatever it is happening.
Right.
Um, um, then um, let's see here. I got a lot of these. Another one, and this is something maybe another one I have is Tron,
Hmm. Mm.
which is another like this is a world of digital creations.
Yeah.
It's I don't know if you've watched the original Tron anytime recently. It's very
Not.
funny how it's like a list of like early computing terms, and each one is a character. It's like this
Mhm.
is a program.
Right.
This is the you
Right.
know
Yeah. No, I haven't.
processor.
I haven't seen the original since like whenever it came out, like the
it's
80s.
it's really interesting in that it is like so the world of Tron, everything seems to have like everything that would be in a computer has sort of a consciousness to it, but it's also it's like it doesn't really make any sense, and there's kind of something sort of like dreamlike and metaphorical about it in that it's like what are you like are we seeing what this guy experiences when he gets sucked into the computer? Is this are we supposed to think this is what really goes on inside a
Right.
computer? Like it's not even ever really made clear, but it's kind of like this idea that there's a that's just sort of how he is, even maybe us as the audience or him are able to perceive this abstract concept of
Right.
being inside of a computer is by it being visualized in that way. But it's really unclear. Like 'cause inside the world of Tron, like programs are all people and have
Right.
a consciousness and can be killed basically if they're deleted, and but it's also like it's such a weird way to think of a computer like it's like the spreadsheet basically. It doesn't, they don't get into it like this, but like it has its own like
Some
autonomy
consciousness and yeah.
separate from
Right.
the notepad,
Right.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
Well, I think
weird way to divide it up, but go
I mean,
ahead.
I think what's interesting is that we now have like metaverses that exist,
Yes,
right? So we
right.
almost can dematerialize our character and put them in
Yes,
that space. In a way that's
that's yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no.
I
I
have you I
also go
Ready
ahead.
Player One. I mean, I haven't watched Ready Player One, but
Ready
I
Player One is I've seen Ready Player One. I mean, Ready Player One is probably the worst, most recent Spielberg movie.
mhm.
Um,
Right.
it's a mess of a concept. It's like I have my issues with Ready Player One, the book, and my issues with Ready Player One, the movie. Um, like it's heavily dependent on um, like nostalgia. It's like nostalgia, and in my opinion, it um, sort of accidentally presents a terrifying dystopia.
Mhm.
Like the book and even the movie, but the book more, like it is a dystopian world, but it's like a dystopian world because it's being like manipulated by a corporation that wants to take it over. What's good about the world is that it is only filled with like recognizable IP from the 70s and 80s. That's the redeeming part of the world
Mhm.
that we need to try and save.
Right.
um, and it seems lost on the actual book that that part of the world is bad too, and is actually the same as the part that it is the
Right.
corporate overlord that they're trying to fight. But like the corporate overlord is like in the accessories market
Right.
and
Right.
trying to sell gadgets and stuff. Um, and then I think the movie suffers from like Space Jam too, only prominently featuring Warner Brothers characters.
Mhm.
Uh, it's a huge issue.
Right.
Um,
Well, it does feel
but
like I need to watch it because I feel like there is some potential corollaries there in
absolutely,
yeah. I'll have to
yeah,
watch
no,
it.
there is a ton. It's definitely a watch before doing something like this. It's also a story that takes place in two worlds and does some good like in it does a good job. I mean, Spielberg directed it of like letting these worlds collide in the third act and making that make sense and be interesting, of like having simultaneous action happening in both the real world and in this metaverse. Um, the I think that it looks terrible, the movie.
Mhm.
I hate how the like metaverse world looks. Um, it there's like an attempt to like make it look really artificial, and I understand why the decision was made, but ultimately it like looks like the bad Beowulf animation.
Right.
It's like that like unappealing aesthetic
Right.
of like we've found the uncanny valley and we're gonna live there.
Yeah.
um, but I think it's definitely an interesting reference point for this project for sure. Um, hold on, let me move some things up this list. Um, I'll come back to those. Add Ready Player One. Um, then while we're on Ready Player One, actually, I'll say Wreck It Ralph,
Hmm.
um, which I have a friend who had a very funny reaction to Wreck It Ralph, which was, wait, this movie's mostly about candy? Dude, it almost all takes place in the like candy
Okay, I
themed
think
Mario Kart world,
right. Right.
which is like kind of maybe not what you expect going in, but
Right.
there is there's a couple of things that I think are comparable in Wreck-It Ralph to this. One is the idea that these nouns we're talking about, there is like a reference point in the real world where you could talk about them that is different than their sort of magical existence
Yeah.
that we're focusing on. Like Wreck-It Ralph does exist as a video game in the sort of real world
Right.
of that movie. But then it's like there's this whole background world you don't know about as a person where
Right.
the video game characters all meet up after work and have a beer.
Right.
Um, and it seems like we're kind of proposing a sort of a version of that where
Yeah.
these things that you think of as a sort of a static thing that there's that Toy Story element of when you're
Yeah.
looking away, they all are doing something secret. It's interesting how many Pixar movies kind of deal with this sort of thing. I think
Secret Lives of Inanimate Objects.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have my my go-to joke that my old writing partner and I used to make when someone asked what we were working on, if we were working on something, we'd say that we were working on a Pixar movie about all of the instruments in the symphony.
Right.
And then people would believe it for half a second, and then we'd be like, no, we made that up.
No.
And sometimes people would try to be like, no, that's good though. And we'd be like, no, it isn't. But I got access last week to DALL-E 2, the like AI art generating thing I had applied months ago. And I typed in Pixar movie about instruments talking to each other, and I did get a really funny render out that's like in the style of like the 2D Pixar art that they'll like have over their credits and sometimes in their like stuff. I mean, let me see if I can find it. But I have found that this DALL-E thing is like shockingly good for like ideation and kind of like concept arty type tasks.
I don't know what it is.
Have you not heard of this? DALL-E
no.
2, DALLE-2.
Yeah.
So do you know GPT-3?
No.
The text generation AI that was like 2 years ago came out and people were like, whoa. So it's this company OpenAI that is like an AI model creating company. But DALL-E 2 is an image generation AI where you give it a phrase and it creates an image basically. And like how these AIs are trained, basically it had a whole list of phrases and images, and it's a GAN, a generative adversarial network. So basically like it learns to create the corpus of images from the corpus of words, and then you give it new words and you see kind of what it creates.
Gotcha.
So I typed in, I think I just texted it to you. Yeah, this was my prompt, and that was what came out of it.
1 second. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, yeah, I can see that.
If you start to look close, you see like the seams, and you'll see little like things that don't quite make sense, and they're not what an artist would draw. But yeah, it's
pretty impressive.
It's pretty impressive that it did it from just that phrase. But anyway, well, maybe we'll try some nouns prompts later and see what happens.
Maybe if yeah, no, that's cool. I like it.
But anyway, this all kind of reminded me of both that Pixar thing and it feels sort of on theme here. But anyway, yeah, there's lots of these. Even like Finding Nemo is a little bit like these fish have this secret life you don't know about.
Right.
It almost would be like a traditional, like that feels different than Bambi, where like
it's just like it's not the
obviously there's the hunter, but you're just in the animal world, and there's almost a sense of like if a hunter was there, what would they? It's almost that sort of more feels metaphorical. If like they couldn't interact, it doesn't feel like they're hiding it from them. But then Finding Nemo, they kind of interact with the human world, with the like diver scooping up Nemo and all of that stuff.
And the whole thing in the being in the dentist office and
And so
Mhm.
that is that Pixar thing. Whereas like Bugs Life, again, that feels more like a little bit more like this is not the sort of the secret life of Bugs. This is just sort of like its
Right.
own weird
Yeah.
bug world.
Right.
Um, so I did not put Bugs Life on the
Or
list.
or B movie.
Or B movie. Well, B movie, you know, is set in our real world, of course, and Ray Liotta is a character. Um, I went to the B movie premiere.
Oh, did you?
I did. My brother-in-law was working in marketing at the time and for Paramount, which was releasing DreamWorks movies. And I got to go to the B movie premiere. Jerry Seinfeld introduced it. I sat next to James Wong, the like that he's like the butler in Chinatown, and he's like in like every movie. I believe that's his name. Yeah, James Hong.
Oh, Jim Kong. Hmm. Oh yeah. Right. He's
He
great.
was like the only working Asian actor for about 70 years, apparently, if you look at his IMDb.
Right. That's
Um,
cool.
but anyway, so I've actually watched B movie. That was the only
I,
way I think that was going to happen. But
I had a long conversation with one of the writers on B movie, who actually wrote for Seinfeld and then for many years. So I ended up watching it as a result of that. Yeah, yeah.
it's interesting for someone to create something like Seinfeld, and then this is the next and only other thing they were passionate about.
Right. It's
Then the
amazing.
marriage ref and comedians and cars and coffee.
Yeah.
That's his four piece body of work.
Work.
Um, so then I have some other ones. So this was thinking about who is this character in this dilemma, and does he have a financial problem, or
Hmm.
how does this solve it? One thing that came to mind was Happy Gilmore, which is the Sandler golf movie.
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
And so that is his grandmother's house is being foreclosed, and she's been moved to a nursing home where the evil Ben Stiller is abusive. Um, and he needs to get money to get her house back from the bank. And his plan is to become a professional golfer because he has a really strong hockey swing.
Right.
And it's a bad plan, but it does work.
Right.
But what is good, I think, about his dilemma is it's a financial dilemma, but it's
Yeah.
someone else's financial dilemma, and it's a situation they got into where they seem innocent, the other party,
Hmm.
and so like you are rooting for him to get $150,000 in this golf tournament because it's going to get his grandmother's house back from the bank, and you don't feel bad about him trying to like get money or get a bunch of money because it's not like to make himself wealthy or to get a house for himself or even to solve his own problem with his house being foreclosed at the bank.
Yeah.
It doesn't bring up questions like, are these financial problems his fault?
Right.
Should he have been more responsible? So does he need to learn to be responsible? Is that the problem? Like it's helpful to kind of put it on a third party. And the other thing that's helpful about grandmother is it's like it's not his kids, it's not his wife, it's not his girlfriend, it's someone who where the relationship is like natural but also like simple and a little bit like removed, and you know that the movie's not going to be about his relationship with his grandmother.
Right. It's really,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
and then Brewster's Millions,
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
which I feel like there's a one like there's such a get rich quick scheme element to crypto and a like overnight success element that can be and is real. And if we're talking about financial stuff potentially with this sort of magic bean of it all, it feels like there's maybe a Brewster's Millions-esque set piece that could exist in this movie. A thing where you have access to a great amount of wealth that is shockingly unhelpful in accomplishing some sort of immediate short-term goal. Now in that, it's obviously this like insane premise of you have to spend it all with these rules in order to get even more money, and you can't tell anyone. And it's sort of like that becomes like it creates personal problems for him that he has to be so irresponsible and keep it a secret. Granted, that's also something where there is maybe something in our idea that of is there something he's keeping a secret that's creating personal problems potentially. But I think that they're both the like dealing with sort of potential of like vast sums of wealth and then also just sort of like doing something silly with that. Both of those seem like places this idea could go for a minute.
Right.
Um, then thinking about like the relationship um, to the um, relationship to the character between these characters, I thought I have some more like um imaginary magical friend type
Yeah.
things. Oh, and like there's also like a like in thinking about what is the relation like what is the noun trying to accomplish, what is his relationship with our guy, how is he a straightforward communicator? Those made me think of like Karate Kid and anger management,
Yeah. Of course
like
it is.
Wily mentor
Right.
films.
Yeah.
um and I wonder if there's anything to that, like, is there something, is this noun perhaps smarter than he lets on a little bit in his
Right. Is he like
relationship
a
with
like a Yoda?
Yoda is another good example of that trope.
I mean,
Um,
obviously wise, so it's a little different, but um,
but Yoda still pulls the Mr.
yeah.
Miyagi on you all the time.
Right.
Um, and then imaginary friend type things. Drop Dead Fred, I haven't seen since I came out. That's like
Oh
a
yeah.
girl's imaginary friend from when she was a child, like shows back up.
Yeah.
No idea if that's helpful or useful, but I just vaguely remembered it. Fight Club
Right.
is, I think, actually probably something helpful and interesting. One, I wonder, like, we've talked about this noun, is how, to what extent is this noun uniquely magical? And there is a, like, both comedically and perhaps interestingly, like, are there actually other people going through a similar journey in this world?
Hmm.
Is that everyone with a noun? Like, is he the only one like that? Or is there like a sort of a like secret group of people who've been interacting with these creatures?
Right.
Um, or is that where things go at some point? But so that's kind of interesting. And then also that question we have of like, is this guy crazy? Is he imagining this?
Right.
What do other people think is happening? And like, what do we as the audience think? I think that there's both potential for like actually having that conversation with the audience or just doing a fake out of that with them.
Yeah.
Um, then also thinking about like both the hiding and this sort of like otherworldly, potentially comedic character, Alf.
Right. Yeah.
But that also Beetlejuice.
Mm.
Um, I don't remember. I know Beetlejuice has some kind of goal. I think he's been like kicked out of where he's from, maybe.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't remember, but um, but Beetlejuice, I think Beetlejuice is another one where Alec Baldwin is the lead of that movie, or not even the girl. What's her name? There's so many characters that are
Yeah,
like
Winona
more
Ryder.
prominent than Beetlejuice.
Winona Ryder.
Winona Ryder, but then
Yeah.
like if
Yeah.
there's a secondary set of leads, it's
Right.
Alec Baldwin and his wife, who are the ghosts. I think
I looked
Beetlejuice
at
is in that movie for like 8 minutes. I forget what the like. There's like a
Right.
fun fact on that, but he's the title character for a reason.
Right.
Um, but uh, but yeah, the Beetlejuice is, I think, also like obviously like huge personality, um,
Yeah.
strong point of view on the world. Um, I think that those are things we would want with this character.
Right.
Um, then another thing that Beetlejuice made me think of was, and this one is really one person in himself, but it's a magical object, the mask.
Hmm.
And the mask, he's Stanley Ipkiss. He's
Right.
a mild-mannered, overly mild-mannered bank teller. And the mask is a magical, mythological Norse mask, as explained by Ben Stein, that kind of turns him into a cartoon character-ish, like wild trickster type person. Um, he seems to have an interest in cartoon characters as a character that seems to inform why it does that to him. Um,
Right. It's like it well, it's like based on Loki, right? And it like brings out the
yeah,
uninhibited version of oneself. So when the other
right.
person puts on the mask, they become like the ultra villain,
Yes.
right? It like
Um,
is that
but yes, exactly. But so he robs the bank is the first thing he does as the mask,
right?
which I think is interesting because any character who could became the mask could rob a bank, but he's a bank teller. So it
Yeah.
is like he immediately turns on the world that he's from and takes
Right.
advantage of it in a certain way. And then that also gets him involved with, like, that's how he ends up crossing over with the like criminal bank robber people, is they happen to be trying to rob that bank at the same time because they were criminals.
Right.
And he was just there because he wanted to have a fun night out in the town and rent a limo.
Right.
And so he needed money. So of course you rob the bank.
Right.
Um, but there's definitely, I think, it's like a lot of wish fulfillment happening. And also, like, he goes on a huge character growth journey. Um, the movie ends with him throwing the mask off a bridge because he has kind of integrated that into himself
Right.
and no longer needs that. He can be the sort of good parts of that's being bold and assertive and without being like a reckless, out of control part of it. And that is at the beginning of the movie, his dilemma is kind of like himself kind of being in the way of his success, and he can't quite. He gets a big opportunity to go to a nightclub, exclusive nightclub with his friend, and he's like unable to get past the doorman because he like gets stopped for half a second and then can't
Right.
kind of bring himself to explain what happens and that he was actually with those people and so on and so forth. And then and he also his car, because his car is in the shop and they're being jerks at the car shop, but basically he can't assert
Right.
himself.
You can't. Yeah.
And that's causing all of his problems. So it's a pretty simple, like, he can't assert himself. He gets the magical device that makes him way over assert himself and learns how to have the balance. It's like a finding balance kind of a plot. And I think at the start of the movie, his character probably believes that what he's missing isn't balance. What he's missing is power and assertiveness and the things that he then is able to get really easily. Um, so it's kind of like his initial goal is probably something that overshoots where he would want to land, is sort of how that development and arc
Right.
works. Um, so then I've got three more. I got
Okay.
a lot of these.
That's great.
Weird science.
Okay. Yeah. Classic.
That's they create
Yeah.
a magical creature on a computer. It's a again who knows how true this is. Supposedly written over one long weekend. It kind of shows in some ways. The initial draft obviously would be what that meant, not the
Hmm.
people who don't understand how movies work think that means that they
Right.
like
They went and shot
took it
it.
out the typewriter and went and shot it. But there is something to like. It's really unclear in that movie. One, how do they actually like? There seems to be a magical force at play outside of what anyone actively does. Like
Hmm.
they tap into a supercomputer and hook up electrodes to a Barbie, and then the next thing you know, they've got this genie. Um, and it seems like they've channeled. It seems like reading between the lines, they've channeled some sort of supernatural force to help them, rather than actually created it. But in the text of the movie, they've simply just created this genie because that's what happens when you tie a supercomputer to a
To
Barbie
Barbie.
with
Yeah.
electrodes. Um, and the computer is so smart that
Just
I don't know.
figured it out.
But that there's definitely like one, these guys are computer dorks, and
Hmm.
that's how they're able to tap into this life-changing power. Very much feels like the crypto community.
Right.
Um, and then they also like their initial instinct is parties and sex and cars, and by the end they kind of are worried about their family and um, safety, and they kind of like it's another thing where they sort of
Right.
overshoot, like you know
Yeah.
becoming what becoming a man is in that
Right.
one.
Right.
um uh and they're teenagers, which is interesting.
Hmm.
I don't I don't go to that kind of a protagonist, but what's also interesting is there's two of them,
Hmm.
and you know, I don't think we would in our story that we're trying to tell. It does not feel natural to have just like for it to be a two
Two.
people from the start turn into a three-hander.
Hmm.
But there's like another movie trope that is like the kind of like best friend you have to let in on the secret halfway
Hmm.
through the movie,
Right.
um, who then is using it his own way somehow, maybe, or is put in
Right.
danger later. And that actually does seem like there's some potential there for both another character and a development of some sort. Um, and then the mask, also to go back to that, the someone evil takes over this
Right.
power, and you have to, you know, figure out how to fight them without it or get it back or struggle with that. Um, that is, I think, something that there's some potential for.
Right.
And in weird science, it's like all the trouble in weird science is entirely their own creation. There's basically no external um, issue. Like
Yeah.
they get in problems, and then with wishes from Lisa, they create
Their own problems.
scenarios and people who cause issues. It's all their own problems. To the
Right.
extent there's like stakes, it's parents are coming home from vacation, we have to get the house back in order.
Right. And their brother
Um,
back. Isn't it their brother back
well,
in
the
order
brother
for
gets turned into a
into
big like sloppy
pizza?
monster.
Yeah.
It looks like Pizza the Hut from
Yeah.
Spaceballs. But again, it's like that is something I think that Lisa does to him.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think they wish it. It's like he, yeah, as you say, like he's like she's like the genie. And I think they
Yes,
wish
that's a
it.
little bit of like a monkey's paw,
Yeah.
which I avoided genie trope. I think that that's a little too easy.
Well, I don't also
Not
think
that I think that that's not like, to me that's not what this thing is giving you. It's not giving you
I don't think that
immediate
that's
sudden
I don't
things
get
like
the
in that way.
yeah. I don't feel like that's what the nouns are really about. I don't think the
N-
nouns are about fulfilling
no.
your fantasies.
No, I don't. Yeah, but and so
Yeah.
weird science is there for the
Yeah.
computer part of
Yeah.
it more than
No,
the
I get it.
genie
Totally.
part of it.
Totally.
Speaking of which, it brings me to Short Circuit,
Oh yeah.
um, which especially Short Circuit 2, some unfortunate brown face.
Oh, I don't remember, I don't remember that.
Fisher Stevens, and I believe Jewish American actor, plays Indian. Nice guy. Picked him up from the airport once. Years later, had lunch with him.
Oh.
Really great guy, good actor. Um, yeah, he was a producer on the terrible movie that was the first movie I worked on as a PA. Gary the Tennis Coach was later released direct to DVD as
I
Balls
missed.
Out, the
Oh,
Gary Houseman story starring Sean William Scott.
I missed
And
that one.
it's the last movie Randy Quaid made before going completely insane. He and his
That's what did
wife,
it. That's what did it to him.
well, no, they were already, he and his wife wrecked the Four Seasons and stiffed the production with a $5,000 room service bill, which I loved and was very funny to handle calls on.
Yeah.
Um, and like wrecked the room like a rock star would, like left it with like $3,000 of damages and a $5,000 room service bill after doing 3 weeks on the movie.
Oh man.
Um, but anyway, yeah, that's I'm in the end credits of that movie as the office production assistant, my first credit. But it hilariously, like, it was just sat on the shelf for like 5 years from after I did it, so that I like went on and was doing real things for a while.
Right.
But Short Circuit, it's Johnny Five. He's a military robot that
Hmm.
sort of has a consciousness and an alive. It's ET with a robot. And he gets freed by Steve Gutenberg, who's a scientist. Um, and he's super powerful and can like control other computers and things like that. And I don't remember what Steve Gutenberg wants or needs. I know Johnny Five is kind of like an iron giant. He's like created for war, but just wants to be. Um, then the last, no, I've got three more. Geez, I scrolled down. Horton hears a who.
Okay.
That's the who. That's a. It's like a crossover. Seuss. Horton's a big elephant, and he is, I think, sleeping, and he starts to hear something in his ear, and it's a who from Whoville.
Hmm.
But Whoville, as we know, which we know from the Grinch and all of that, actually exists on a like single flower.
Oh,
Um, and they're all actually super tiny. We've never noticed this. And there's one of them who's like speaking into like a loudspeaker thing and talking to
right.
Horton. And it's like, and no one else can see the who, and no one else believes that those are the who's are there. And Horton like helps them or saves them somehow, and then also like accomplishes his own personal goal. Uh, Horton is similar. He's kind of like clumsy, if I recall, and he's also like Stanley Ipkiss, like not non-assertive, in a sort of like he's
Right.
a giant elephant, and so that's funny because he's like a wussy elephant. Um, but it's like there's a kangaroo that is mean to him, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's a thing of like he's communicating with someone that no one else knows even exists, and they don't really believe he's the only one who can hear the who. So then I have two more that I haven't seen. One I hear is great and sort of involves like computers and the world, global stakes, is the Mitchells versus the Machines, which is, I think, like it's animated family comedy, and it's like your family on a road trip when a like Skynet type computer takeover of the world happens.
Mhm.
Um, um, I'd be just curious to see like how the computer world and the real world sort of interact in that movie. I think that could be interesting. And then, and this I think looms large over any and all NFT projects, even though it's of course a Web 2. The Emoji Movie.
Mm.
Um, I think that I have not seen it. I imagine it's a I imagine it's a sort of a masterclass in how not
To
to
make a movie.
make a movie out of a abstract concept. Even just down to the visual of putting legs on them. Like the smiley face with the legs.
Yeah.
I was just immediately like I saw that image and I was like, one, that's terrifying. But two, there's so many emojis that
That's
have legs.
right. Right. So they
And
have legs.
also the emojis that's like you add legs to the ones that don't have legs, now you've lost the essence of what makes them interesting to begin with. Like what's interesting about the smiley face is it's just a face.
Right.
And it's not it isn't it isn't like a man with a yellow it's like you start to pull the thread on this perfectly circular yellow face in a way that like you shouldn't.
Right.
um
That's interesting. I mean, I think obviously there are a lot of corral, like a lot of there's a close relationship between these emojis and these nouns because like the emojis
yeah
they represent they're symbols that represent emotions, whatever, what have you. That's what I mean. Initially, what they were created to
yeah
represent, right? And they're and they're like the tone of an email or whatever, the motion of writing the email. And then these nouns are like the symbols of
hmm
objects that, but they're like again, they're the they're like destructuralized or they're
yeah
deconstructed. I guess is a better term. Yeah, they're deconstructed.
yeah
So
but
yeah,
there is a sense that you do feel like they should some have some of those qualities within them still, and
yeah.
that should inform them. um but yeah, I think there's, and again I've seen the trailer. That's another one where I met with the director of that briefly on something that did not happen for me or him. But Sony was really excited about Emoji Movie. This was before it came out, and they were developing the 12 Days of Christmas with him,
Mm.
um, as an animated movie, and I like had just like one or two conversations about it with where it's like there'd be nine ladies dancing, there'd be six
Song.
geese a
Yeah.
laying, there'd
Right.
be five golden rings. You can kind of see the logic of from the director of the Emoji Movie because there's like
Yeah.
150 emoji. If you do the math, there's like 70 of these
Characters.
characters
Yeah.
from the song. Um, that ended up not happening. That movie, I don't know why, but a nice enough guy. Um, the the thing where it makes me be like, it gives me pause and makes me think about this noun thing is like, you know, there's a like that movie. Emojis were obviously very, I understand why it was made, and I actually don't think
Yeah.
it's a terrible idea for an
No.
animated movie. Just the name and the concept, like I totally get why that happened. I think, and again, these movies are, especially something like that, made by so many people with so many voices. I don't blame this director guy at all. Um, but like, it seems to me that the movie fundamentally does not really relate outside of some loose visuals to like why emojis are popular or useful or interesting or what people like about them.
Yeah.
Um, and then visually, you know, they to me they like looked different from emojis in a way that was unhelpful. Um,
Right.
and they don't look like what you would expect an emoji in an emoji animated movie to even look like. And so that two things that makes me think about that are, I think, important for this project are one, like, what are we saying these nouns look like? You know, do they look exactly like the nouns art uh
The actual
from
JPEG.
the JPEG?
Yeah.
Does that mean that they are flat? Like, does that like how what does exactly like that mean? Does that mean they're flat, or does that mean
Yeah.
they're like cubified out? Like, what
Right.
is like? Does that mean they like the JPEG is not a full body shot?
No.
Does that mean they don't have legs, or does that mean they have legs that you would logically imply from what is already there? Because the biggest issue with the legs on the emoji is that it's not logically implied.
No.
Is the implication to like this always happens when they try and like draw Pac-Man
Right.
realistically. Like
Right.
Pac-Man does not have legs.
No. No.
He clearly moves like
With his
that
mouth. Yeah.
by opening and closing his mouth. It's very
Right.
clear.
Right. I
Um,
mean, I yeah. I mean, I think that's a very good question. There's something. There's a part of me that would lean into the fact that just they appear as they appear, like they are what they
mhm,
are, and then they can grow in like that. They can grow and shrink in size, but they're still going to always be pixelated, no matter
mhm.
what. And so they,
I think that their look is cool, and
yeah,
I think that it's especially if we're gonna do a story that like look, it's one thing if you're like, all right, it's fully animated, we're gonna go into this nouns world. I think there's a meaningful conversation to be had about like what is the visual look of this entire movie? What is the process where it's getting made? Do we want to be dealing with flat 2D sprites the entire movie? Is that going to look insane? Like it, and I think that there's a conversation to be had there where
yeah,
you change what they look and you create something a little more inspired by them, but with a more cohesive visual look that could work in that for the full runtime of the film being in that world without it like driving you mad. Uh, but I think if we're contrasting this to like the real world,
hmm,
and this is something that's kind of existing on a computer as this is an NFT or this is a thing that's like what the sort of parallel to what the thing is in the real world, I definitely lean towards you're starting with it looking like the thing. And so you want it to kind of stay as much like that as possible. And I think you're right that it can evolve. I think it could do potentially more than grow, but look exactly the same. I think that there's a world where by the third act, this thing can change completely, turn into something else. Five nouns could combine into a noun
right,
Voltron.
right,
Um, where you can do some things that explore new visual looks and things outside of what is the already established. But I think that's a place you have to like get to and earn
right.
in this kind of a setup rather than where you start. And then the other thing that the emoji movie makes me cautious of and makes me think, and I think we've been doing a good job of this so far, and I think that some of your early like thoughts on the characters that you brought really are in this direction is like not losing sight of what is actually unique and interesting and appealing about the nouns themselves.
Right.
There are some unique characteristics to how the sale of them was done and to exactly when and how they launched, but there's plenty of other similar enough projects that did not take off and did not spark and did not
Hmm.
like uh, appeal to people. And obviously like you know half of success is being in the right place at the right time, and I think the nouns obviously were. I don't think it would be super easy to launch the nouns project this week.
No.
um but I think that it would be foolish to dismiss them as a success of luck and timing. I think that there is, as we've discussed, something intangibly appealing about them. Both how they came about and those pieces of it, but just also just right there in front of you, and the way that they vary from each other. I don't know. It's there. There's something that feels almost indescribable, but obvious about their appeal. And I would want to make sure not to lose that in
Yeah.
describing it.
Yeah. I mean, I
Um,
also like, I mean, like, again, like, I don't know where we're going to go with them and where we're going to take them, but like, if we do spend time with them in a metaverse or a variety of metaverses or digital landscapes, and like their look always remains the same, like they're like,
mhm.
and it contrasts these, could be like remarkably
Yeah,
complex and like visually just, detailed and, you know worlds. I think
yeah,
that's also a lot of fun, and they're always saying the same. And maybe, if our protagonist is going into these worlds, maybe their look is intrinsically changed by this anyway. So
yeah.
like,
No, for sure.
keep them. Yeah, I think that, the simplicity of them is definitely um, a major element of what is
I
so
just had a
appealing.
funny visual
Yeah.
of like a like this human protagonist in this world is suddenly sort of like a low pixel count moving GIF type
Yeah.
image.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
I mean,
I,
if they're, and again, I like the idea. Maybe they are going into different, metaverses, and the human is like constantly changing shape with like the.
but like that like almost like video game sprites made from photographs look of like Mortal Kombat, where it's like they took pictures of real people from Mortal Kombat,
Uh-huh.
and then they kind of like they're animated
Oh,
the same way you animate Mario.
right.
Like I'm
Yeah.
imagining a
Yeah.
person in that world with
Right.
that look. I've
Yeah.
never seen that in a movie. It's very funny. Like and
Yeah. Well, this is me. Yeah.
but he's still photorealistic. You would still be shooting all this person's stuff with a
Right.
camera, but then
Right.
you
But
would
then you
be
just like you
make him
because
look
you
shitty,
eight
basically.
bit him. You've eight bit him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a limited color palette. He's low pixel count.
Yeah.
Um, kind of badly rotoed edges.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I think that okay, yeah, that's all great. I mean, that's amazing amount of kind of work in considering potential corollaries, and I think that's fantastic. And
then my
oh,
big question that I have in the notes document, and then we'll go on to whatever you brought to this meeting. Now that I've taken an hour of listing movies,
that's great.
is this idea of thinking of these things as magic beans, I thought was really interesting. And this is kind of not answered by Jack and the Beanstalk, really, but it is a question that I have, which is who sells them the beans?
Yeah.
That is always the like, in Click with Adam Sandler, of course, it's the mysterious TV it's a mysterious TV repairman type guy that is what is kind of involved with it. It's Christopher Walken. It's the same seemingly archetype as in Pleasantville.
Hmm.
Um, this sort of mysterious scientist television repairman type character that gives you TV power. And of course, famously, the remote comes from the Beyond section of Bed Bath and Beyond. I don't know if you remember that joke.
Right. No, I didn't.
Um, uh, but but yeah, there's this sort of a magical salesman in a lot of these versions of this trope that gets you into this world, and usually returns right at the end of the story for like half a second, either to like just give you a nod or like
Right.
um but that was just something we hadn't discussed when we were talking about this before. And again, it's like usually these stories don't answer that question,
Yeah.
or it's a version of like it was the nouns themselves. Like it's
Right.
someone who was you've met later was pretending to be some, whatever. But that was my new question that I was curious
Yeah.
about
Like,
if
who is the
going
seller of the beans? Who is the
this
seller of
route.
nouns? Yeah, well, okay. And I think along with that, I mean, if with the magic beans, version of this, the magic beans serve a very specific purpose, and then they're no longer. I mean, I think the click is different, but like you plant the beans and then they grow into the beanstalk, and that's the thing that transports a person to this other world. With click, it's remote that they control. With the nouns, I feel like the nouns are conscious on some level. They're autonomous, so it's not a direct analogy. Like it's like they
Yeah.
have their own thing going.
Hmm.
But yeah, well, that's a good segue because most of the work that I did um, in the last several days since we last spoke was kind of looking at, like, again, more into like what is it unique about the nouns, and I did feel like their purpose on some level probably emerges out of this their unique qualities, right? Like whatever they're there to do is probably connected to why they're different than, say, other NFTs or JPEGs or whatever is out there. Um, so, I think one of the things that one of the things that I realized, they're actually not randomly generated. I thought they were like kind of it was like a random generated thing. There's 48. I actually put this stuff in the previous the 11th document. I can copy and paste it over if it's
Okay.
helpful.
Yeah, that would be helpful actually.
Yeah. So I'll do that in a second. There's 48 backgrounds, 48 bodies, 48 accessories, 48 heads, 48 glasses. I guess they're all randomly, well, not random, but they're all kind of put together to create. And so I think that gives, and I think actually they may be creating more heads, or they have created more heads. So, but initially that gives like 254 million possible combinations. There's probably more than that, but um, but they're not. It's not randomly generated. It's predicted by the previous block hash.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
like I don't quite understand what that means, but it's not just a random generation. It's actually emerges out of the blockchain,
Hmm.
which I think, I mean, again, this is maybe too in the weeds, but like I think there's something interesting about it. It's like these nouns are created by the blockchain in like a real way. So it gave me I had this thought of like it's like it's an immune it's like an immune response. Like if
Hmm.
there's some sort of threat that this world is experiencing, like if you think of the blockchain as an entity and there's some sort of threat that it like pops out a noun that's there with some sort of purpose to protect or defend against something. So I thought that was kind of cool, and so maybe that's like part of what they're about, is that they're there to defend against threats that they see. And
Hmm.
I don't think this is a new idea, but it just the fact that happens. So what else is unique about them? Well, they're 32 times 32 pixel art. They exist. They fully exist on chain, which, unlike a lot of other NFTs, which I think like the actual art exists
Hmm.
like in some sort of file, these actually fully exist. So like they really are about being, like they are totally native to the digital space, the blockchain itself. And I don't know how much we want to get into like blockchain and like what that is. I do feel like it's probably going to require
Hmm.
some touching upon that. Um, so this is kind of, let me just see. Yeah, I mean, then of course the other element that's unique. Well, I wouldn't say unique, but it's unlike much of the rest of what exists out there, is that there's this CC0 element to it. But anyway,
Hmm.
we talked about that. So like, and why is that important? I mean, it's a different paradigm from a like philosophic, from a business philosophical perspective. It's like things should not be. You should not be able. Ownership should not entail control,
Hmm.
and um, and so that to me, I think, again, we talked a little bit about this, but that's a unique element to it. So I feel like they, they are liberated, and they are maybe potentially liberators, whatever that
Hmm.
is,
Hmm.
and that just feels like it's innate in their kind of DNA of
No,
all of that.
definitely. And it both does, and it also kind of like the treasury element of the
Hmm.
nouns is in some ways very separate and different from that, and also they're like kind of intrinsically linked. But that the initial money from selling these nouns does not go to the noun creator to
Right.
even really a portion of it. I know that I think I'm sure some of the funds have gone back into the project in a sense, but
Well,
in
so
that way.
the noun creators just get nouns, right? Like each noun,
Yeah.
every one of every 10 nouns goes to
Yes.
the every 10th noun goes to the creators. And I think there are like 8 creators or something like that, 8 or 10. And so that's, yeah, but all the money, yeah,
But
yeah,
right, exactly. And but there's something similarly about that with as opposed to so then there are other you know NFT DAO organization, large projects, very successful one I won't necessarily name right now, where it's very clear that the attempt is being made at least for the bulk of the wealth generation to go to the people at the
created it.
top of them.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I do.
and
I mean, I do. And then there's like Meta, which is
mhm,
building their own, or trying to build the metaverse, and they're trying to
yes,
control,
yeah,
I think, I mean, like, all joking aside, I mean, if one projects into the future, not even, I guess, 20 years from now, and you think about what the metaverse could be, and like what ownership over that space could imply,
right,
and like, and how so much of our time is spent like literally in these digital spaces now. Like we're you could argue we're in the metaverse right now with this
yes, 100
communication.
percent,
And now if all of these communications have to be happening through, you know somebody else's channels, like Zoom is is our, our host right now. But if it's
right,
like, if it's Mark Zuckerberg, if it's some or other organization that you don't want to name, you
yes,
know, that's, I think, a real dangerous and
uh,
scary thing. Like I don't think it's just in the realm of like Wreck-It
no,
Ralph, like where, I mean, I like Wreck-It Ralph, but I mean, like, it's not the same thing. This is like, I think there are real implications
yes,
potentially for just to create a dystopian world for all of us
yes.
to live in.
Yes. Well, there's a funny thing going on with the Facebook Meta thing, which is their new app, um, Horizon Worlds. Horizon is like the name of their like inside of on the MetaQuest social network that they're
Mm-hmm.
kind of also
Mm-hmm.
making. And you can be a creator inside of Horizon Worlds and create and sell digital items. And Horizon, and people did the math, and it's like you only get to keep like 48% of the money. But the reason is every transaction on the Quest, 30% goes to Oculus. But then inside of Horizon, that even though that's also Meta, that has its own fee structure
Right.
that then gets taken off of that. And it's like, it's actually, I think, comes from unintentionally comes from a good place from Facebook, which is they're trying to like not cheat and have Horizon like we don't charge a fee because we can get away with that because we're already getting the
Mm-hmm.
Quest fee.
Right. Right.
And there's probably some antitrust reasons they're structuring it that way too. But it like immediately shows you that like in this new paradigm where they're trying to be both the platform and the main like and the main content creator at the same time of this new thing, they're just attempting to capture all of the value
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
every layer and vertically integrated in a way that not even the iPhone does.
Right. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, potentially we become serfs of, like, in these digital worlds, which
yeah,
become more, as Bugmain says, they're more real than the real
the
world.
51% is where we already are,
It's
as
already
he
there.
says.
I know that I spend more of my time interacting with pixels than I do with humans at this point. So
Yeah. So no, these are definitely real dilemmas and issues. And the first main work use case that Meta is pushing is Horizon Workrooms, which is like Zoom for
yeah,
that. And I think that it's like immediately, I think that like, I'm not sure that will actually take off, but like the idea that you're going to do your work inside of their platform is to me terrifying. That you could have a job that requires you to be on Facebook to go to work.
I actually know people that work on Meta projects, and they have to do these things with the Oculus, and they're in the space, and they have to like take breaks because they get like so nauseated
Yes.
from where we're in the Oculus and like looking. But yeah, but I mean that's those the you figure that element is going to disappear. But yeah, that this is already happening. They are
Yeah.
required to do this work in this spaces already, and
Uh,
it's yeah, it has real implications. I mean, you can't, how does free speech work if you're like trying to speak against?
Absolutely. I mean, that's
Yeah,
already a problem.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and so yeah, it's interesting.
Well,
You know,
yeah.
Apple's about to enter this space. That's going to be interesting. Um,
The so I mean, this kind of gets into the realm of potential characters, potential protagonists, which is something that
yeah.
you kind of mentioned as a question last week, which I've thought some about. I mean, the first instinct I had was, you know, that we're dealing with someone who is an animator, who is, a art
Creator of some kind, an artist. Yeah.
and
I read through your notes.
oh, you did. Okay, okay, yeah. So well, yeah, and then that to me felt like a possible way to go. It maybe is too obvious, but
I,
sometimes that's
No, I thought that was interesting. I liked it. Having read those notes about them being like, are they a Disney animator that got
right.
fired for
Well,
trying to?
you mentioned the what was it? What was the project that had like only um, Warner Brother characters?
Well, they didn't only have it, but Ready
Uh,
Player One, yes,
Ready
it,
Player
it
One,
largely had.
right? Well, it's
And
like
then,
someone who
just sorry,
wants,
quick aside. Then Space Jam 2, which is also Warner Brothers,
right,
had so many of the same characters from Ready Player One, and
right.
was like Ready Player One-esque. It's like a real like, oh come on, you already used all of this. But anyway,
Right. Yeah, I mean, maybe this person is like trying to sneak other characters into their work or from other other IP sources and like gets because I mean for intrinsic reasons because this character would really belong in this world. Like, I don't know what it
yeah,
is.
no, I think that it might be starting to get a little too one-to-one there, a little too like
Yeah,
A to B. And I think my instinct is it should be a little more A to C.
right.
Like if he's gonna literally work for sort of the competitor to this concept and get fired from them, I wonder if it should be so explicitly he's fired
For that specific reason.
for something that's also kind of the same reason as the ethos of the other thing,
Right.
rather than he's fired for something that's part of what's wrong with
That world.
this world, but isn't like necessarily like he's fired for trying to propose exactly the solution from the other world. More
Yeah.
like the other world would solve it,
Right.
but
But it's yeah.
it's
It's
not he's not kind of there yet. He's
right.
like going the wrong way, like the same problem a little bit. I
Yeah.
also wonder if it's like, is it his own character he's trying to put in?
Mm.
Which I think maybe, I don't know if you said that or not.
No. I was
Um,
I was thinking he was just like one of the, thousand
well,
people like junior grunts that's like supposed to be doing this thing, and he's like, oh, I want to have some fun and add some things to it. But
yeah, that's why I was thinking it could be interesting that
yeah,
he's gonna have some fun and add
right,
his pet project character
right, yeah,
into it or something like that.
yeah,
I also think about and it did they made it, and it's shockingly an important property for them nowadays. But like, there's always something that was interesting to me about Tim Burton and Nightmare Before Christmas. It was like he was working as an animator at Disney,
mm,
And he kept drawing this Jack Skellington stuff and was like, this thing though, this is the thing. And they were like, for years, like, this is insane. This is terrifying. We make kids movies. But like eventually he got enough clout there that they like did it. And
Yeah,
it's a
to their credit.
classic. And they
Yeah.
retheme their theme park with it every Halloween.
Right. Huh.
Um, but it was this sort of like insane outsider insider idea. Um, and it
Yeah.
also like stands out as some of the like only Disney animated auteur work that there is, where you
Yeah.
can recognize the style of the thing that was created in someone's other non-Disney work.
Right.
There's very few examples of that in the fully animated Disney space. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what a like I don't see any connection between Mission Impossible 4 and the Pixar movies directed by
Right.
Brad Bird.
Right. Right.
Like I do not like those feel like if you didn't tell me who directed a Brad Bird Pixar movie and Mission Impossible 4, I would never be able to tell you those two. And you like blind taste tested me 5 movies. I don't think I'd be able to be like,
Say
oh,
that
this guy did these two.
clearly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think he's a good director, but I just don't think I just don't think that the animation process at the big studios allows for that kind of, you know, the
Independent kind of
yeah,
vision.
the it just because it's well, especially with Pixar, it was Lasseter is the auteur of those
Hmm.
movies.
Right.
I quick Pixar story. So I worked on Big Hero 6.
Mm.
Just in the like later phases of it, doing some rewriting stuff. And this is when Lasseter was still there and in charge of Pixar and Disney. And at Disney, it was like they were turning to him for absolutely everything, terrified of his notes. And there was this scene where there was this weird card game the characters were playing that no one had ever heard of. And it was really, the rules were really confusing. And this is like the scene right before. Have you seen Big Hero 6? Well, spoiler alert if anyone hasn't. His brother dies. The main character's brother dies in an explosion at a laboratory or something like
Hmm.
that. And he's somewhere before that happens or when that happens. And in the version we were working at the time, he was at this card game. And the card game's rules were like so hard to follow. It's a real game. We come to find out John Lasseter loves to play this card game with his family. And it was not his idea to include this in the movie, but they put it in and he hadn't said to cut it. And they were like terrified to take it out or make any changes because they thought he must love it because it was
Right.
his thing. And so I must have rewritten this card game scene like a dozen times. Finally, they screen the next cut for him. And he's like, well, we got to lose this card game. We can't, nobody can follow this.
Right.
But it's like
Yeah.
even with he would loom so large that
They
people
were
would just be making up nonsense that didn't make sense to them, and he wouldn't like to because they thought
rather than just
like
ask him, like, is this? Do we really need this?
yeah. And when it finally like came to it, he was like, "No,
Of course
this
not.
isn't good. See, it
Right.
sucks."
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway,
That's interesting. Yeah.
these are for the viewers, you know. I
Sure.
tell the
Well,
stories for
for
the
me too.
audience.
I need to. I like it. I need stories.
I'm sure that's
Um.
under an NDA, so but
Okay.
it's fine.
um.
They hate him now at Disney, so it won't
Right.
matter.
Right. He's been shamed. So yeah, and then the other ideas I had for potential characters were like I don't know. It's like kind of like the Buddha idea, like the Buddha was like the son of this very
Hmm.
little king, and he goes out into the world and sees all the suffering that exists, and he's like now, so this maybe is like the son of someone who's really ruthless and wealthy and is like creating these spaces, um, trying to control, trying to be the Mark Zuckerberg, and this is the son of that.
That's
And he's gonna, like,
interesting.
rebel against that, and like needs to find and finds these characters who are also aligned with that, and like the Jedi characters, and so then they rise up against the evil forces in that digital space somehow. Thought that could be interesting, and then uh,
That's interesting.
and then a metaverse designer, someone who's in that literally doing the designing the work, and then comes across these creatures that are like hiding in his world that he never created, and and is
Oh, that's Cool World. I hadn't thought of. Do you know
oh,
Cool World?
I remember it, but I
It's
don't
like a
have to.
Roger Rabbity type
Yeah,
movie with the young Brad Pitt.
yeah.
It's like an animator gets like sucked into his own animated world he created. Um, it's a kind of your own creations coming to life kind of a story, and it's much more adult
Yeah.
um, than Roger Rabbit, and much less successful. Um, but that kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, those are. I didn't have many other major thoughts. I think
Um,
based on, but I think there's, I don't know. That's basically where I got to.
okay, yeah. Um, I definitely lean more toward this person working in the world of IP slash animation
Hmm.
slash metaverse rather than the like associate of someone who is
Hmm.
involved in that in a evil way kind of person, the Mark Zuckerberg's grown up
Right.
son in 20 years person.
Yeah.
Between those, if that feels a little more like relatable, even though it's like obviously, people aren't necessarily pursuing creative jobs, but everyone kind of has a job,
Yeah.
and you
And I
kind of can get that. And I feel like I don't know if this is a like the like the like what your father represents, what you represent. I don't know. Some of those themes feel like they don't necessarily line up with
yeah,
this,
totally.
at least immediately. Um, And then this idea of like, is the enemy of this movie the Walt Disney Company or something like that? It's very funny to me. I think that the one thing that I'm cautious about it, nothing to do with like IP or rights or anything like that at all. And obviously, we live in a culture that disagrees with me, but like I would want this idea and movie to creatively stand on its own without these references to other things. Like it I do not want it to exist in reference to Disney. I do not want it to live in that shadow of that. And as a result feel smaller and less important in its own, not, I'm not like so it can be the biggest thing in the world, but like
No, I get it. It's a work.
it,
It's a work on its own. It's not just a sub. It's not
yeah,
just a social commentary. It's not.
yeah. And
Well,
I
I
think
mean,
that's entirely possible to do both of those things.
one
um
way to maybe one way to do that would be to like create a fictional company.
so
And
yes, but like that would be a way to do it, but in a certain sense, like, so like there's two ways to do that kind of. And the one way is to do the sort of like, you know legally this is great and we'll get away with it, but conceptually it's very clearly and obviously has an exact analog.
right,
That version I think actually suffers from the same problem, because this is not a this is not a legal problem. This is a like
right,
conceptual idea space
right,
problem.
right.
And so, the Bert Hertzberg company that makes, Larry Moose, is like, I know what that is, I get
Right.
it. And it's just sort of this, it's like, 1% more creative, but I don't have off the top of my head some good examples of this, but when these in my mind are done best, it's like they are kind of amalgamations of different things that you wouldn't instinctually be putting together at first, but make sense. Like, I really don't have a good example, but it's like, like uh, it's like it's like the Disney of cars. Like, this is bad and doesn't work for a project, but it's like you're taking maybe a different industry, but the
Mm.
like kind of attitude and um aesthetic
Ethos.
and
Mm.
ethos, and one man founded it, and kind of and I don't know what it is for this, but it's like, you talked about this version of, is it a metaverse designer, is he doing
Mm.
this? It's like there's a world where this is like a Disney-esque video game company that
Hmm.
he's fired from, but that is presented in this world as like, no, this is the dominant force. They've been buying up all the other companies.
Did you
you
watch the
know
new Matrix?
I did watch the new Matrix, love the new Matrix,
I
all
I
about the new
I
Matrix.
liked the first half of the new Matrix, actually. I
I
thought,
liked the whole new Matrix.
all right,
I
good.
liked every bit of the new Matrix. I think it was the best movie to come out in our post-pandemic world.
All right, it's a
That's
bold
a strong
statement.
statement. It's a bold statement.
I'm glad. Because I'm a little embarrassed about my liking of it. I have been, but I mean I really really like the conceptual elements of it. Like I just feel like it was a really strong reboot of of that of that
Yes.
concept.
Well, does it suffer a little bit from being pandemic produced content? Yes. I think that hurt a little bit of the scale.
Mm.
It was it was finished during the pandemic. I think that hurt some of the like action and a little bit of the visuals. It's obviously visually very much less ambitious than the first ones. But that said, I'm grading it against every movie that's come out post pandemic, which many of those have this same problem and maybe will forever. Um, but yes, I thought it was terrific. I think that as both, I think as a commentary on modern culture's lack of creativity, I think it was incredible. I agree with it. I think it's a incredibly subversive film. I think much more so than it's given credit for.
Mm.
Um, I Hey, quiet, buddy. Anyway, yeah, I love it. I've seen it 3 times.
All right, I gotta watch it
Big
again.
fan of it.
Maybe it's. I mean, I feel like there's corollary elements to that as well, right? It's like
Yeah,
character in
for
the same
sure.
world. Yeah.
Hmm. One of your note about your thing about the weird little creature existing in the digital world they created kind of reminded me of the opening of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um,
Bad
yeah,
guys, another one. Bad guys, another. Isn't it good guy? Good guy? Good guy? Good guy.
bad guys,
No,
the
no, good guy. The
good
one about the guy. It's Ryan Reynolds. He's in the video game. He's
free guy.
free guy. Free guy. Excuse me. Yeah.
My big issue with that, and I understand they're trying to free him in the movie, but that movie, at least its marketing campaign, seems to present free guy as though that's a video game term everyone is familiar with that is real.
Right. Right.
He's one of those
Yeah.
free
Free
guys that
guys.
everybody talks about. That's a
Yeah.
thing.
Right.
What?
No.
Um,
Clearly,
yeah,
yeah.
that's in some ways sort of the inverse of what we're talking about.
Hmm.
Um, that
Anyway, I didn't mean to get us off the Matrix, but
anyway,
yeah,
yeah, big supporter of
I'm gonna watch it again.
the
I
Matrix.
remember, I really enjoyed it, and then anyway, but yeah, I mean, I hear. So I hear what you're saying. Like it's not. He's not anim. It's not animation. It's not Disney. It's like the video game equivalent of that. Um, it's another related industry.
Yeah, but there's
Could be advertising, marketing,
a
advertising.
bad version of this that has some interest. So, all right. I don't like the movie Don't Look Up.
Mhm. Right.
I think it's bad.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, and I think that it's got a flawed execution, and I think that the actors all seem like they're in different movies, um, with different
Right.
tones.
Right. Yeah, I know.
I thought that the like tech billionaire character was a good version of
Oh
what
yeah.
I'm talking about,
Right.
where so many movies have just like this guy's Elon Musk, this guy's Steve Jobs.
Right.
I thought he was an interesting like amalgam of different
Right.
problematic billionaire figures. He kind of had a Tim Cook aesthetic,
Mhm.
but more of an Elon Musk attitude. But there's some Steve Jobs in there, and it was like it. I thought it picked and chose from different problematic billionaires
Right.
in a really good way that created a
Indi-
unique character
Individual. Yeah.
that felt like relevant, but did not feel like this is a movie where the bad guy is Elon Musk.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so if you can do that for a company, that's
Right.
kind of what I'm talking about. So where it isn't just like, oh, it's Disney, but for video games, it's a little
Right.
bit like, here's a thing that's wrong with Facebook that's wrong with this company. Here's a thing that's wrong with Disney that's wrong with this company. Here's a thing that's wrong with, Apple or Microsoft or
Yeah.
whoever. Um, I think that there's an opportunity to create that within this. If we're trying to like have this guy work for a company he's going to get fired with, that's ultimately going to become the bad guys of the movie. I think there might be
Mhm.
a value to that. And then also, if you want to have your cake and eat it too, in the world of this movie, they bought Disney.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. They own
Like
it.
there's a way to
Or Disney just exists as a separate entity in that world. And
yes, yes, sure. But I'm saying, that you could
yeah.
that as a reflection of how this is them times 10. It's like, yeah,
Right.
they have
Yeah.
them.
They just bought them. Right. Right. Yeah. Sure.
Um,
Totally.
um, because that's also the like, everyone's like, oh, who will Disney buy next? This and that. Like, my God, if someone were to buy them, that's like things are really over.
Right.
Like if
Yeah. If someone can just pick them up, it just yeah. Right.
okay. Um, well,
So
I
I
think
think
that we go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I mean I think obviously you've done a great amount of work on this, which I really appreciate, and thought into like where corollaries and ways we can go and things we can pull from. What do you think in terms of next steps? I mean, is it like at what point do we start planting flags? At what point do we, I
So
mean,
I want to watch and rewatch some of these things that I mentioned and
yeah,
take some notes on characters and structure and like I find it helpful often to do that as a like jumping off point on trying to like figure out what could the structure of a movie be, what could the journey of a character be, because in so many ways every single story is the same and every single movie is the same, and there's just sort of one story that gets told over and over again. And so I find be helpful to like steal the skeleton of another movie, start putting in your own pieces, and then slowly you end up replacing and getting rid of all of the pieces you started
right,
with, and the
right.
next thing you know, you have something that's completely different from where you started, but like it gave you a place to start placing your ideas, and then the
Hmm.
next thing you know, they're so some of your ideas are in the right place, and then you can fill in the rest, and you've got it. So I am curious if any of these movies I mentioned have like a meaningful structure that is like a good template. I think I will only come up know that after watching them. But so I'm gonna watch a few of these and take notes on the like structure of them and the kind of character arcs and the sort of antagonists, a little bit of that. And if I come across one where I'm like, this is great, I think that'll be the next thing we talk about is that. But what I would like to do is kind of like the next time we meet, I want us to start getting like ideas down. Like the old fashioned way is like ideas on index cards, and
Mm.
you start to put them in an order and put
Yeah.
cards together, and this idea goes with this idea, and maybe these should be in the first act, kind of a thing. And I think we'll figure out some digital methodology to do something like that. But I think we're at the place where we need to start kind of not necessarily locking in what the movie and the idea is, but kind of start like concretizing our ideas
Yes.
and
Yeah.
laying them out in a way that we can start to see, oh, this is good. Oh, this is bad. Oh, this should actually be changed to be this way. So I think that
Do you ever use one of those digital whiteboards? Yep.
um, I've never effectively used one that I felt good about.
Yeah.
But yes. And we used one on Brooklyn Nine-Nine called Writer's Room Pro, which is
Mm,
meant to like emulate the way you actually do cards,
mm,
like traditional writer's room, and I hated it,
mhm.
and did not find it useful. But if you have suggestions about one of those or
I've
one you've ever
never. I
used
mean,
or
I've
ever
there
liked,
was one that I we used. I have to go find what it's called on this doc series that I worked on, and it was. I mean, it it was okay. I kind of feel the same way. Like I kind of start doing it, and it's just not
what
tactile.
I end up doing, yeah, my personal process when I do this is I will use actual note cards
Hmm.
and write down ideas on them, and then I will take those note cards and like after I've kind of arranged them and looked at them, then I will type something up
Hmm.
that is like a linear
Right.
typed up version of that information. But I have never been able, I am not good digitally at like creating and organizing information in the initial steps. Like
Right.
I am very kinetic and tactile with
Hmm.
that. And so like I the closest I've come to that working for me is there's a piece of software called Noda, which is a
Mm.
VR mind mapping software where you
Mm.
like put stuff in physical 3D space and
Mm.
draw little lines between it.
Mm.
Um, and that I've actually had a lot of success with being able to like unlock that creative part of my brain while interacting with a piece of software. Normally, if I'm just like at a blank Microsoft Word page, I like can't get the ideas out, and I get too caught up in the like linearity of what it's asking me to do.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what the program I used was. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. The other thing. Oh yeah, the other thing I just thought we should talk about maybe briefly before we break is we touched on it earlier. This aspect of like the auction,
Mm-hmm.
the the like the whole kind of physics or the physics behind the nouns, and is that a meaningful element of the story? Is that too much? Like my inclination is it's not that interesting. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm not like against it, but
Hmm.
my instinct is not like this is the most important part
No.
of this. And I think that like, especially when it comes to like how does this guy end up with this thing?
Yeah.
Like it being like just sent to him buying it on the secondary market, him
Well,
buying it directly from one person,
does he need to
him
own it?
no, but and him not buying it. That's where I was going
Right.
with this.
Okay. Sorry.
Someone else owning it, no one
Yeah.
owning it.
Yeah.
Like think all of those are like not only simpler but also potentially more meaningful and interesting.
Yeah.
And in this world, all of those kinds of ways to acquire one could exist or could not exist. And
Yeah.
I think that's all like I'm not beholden to any of those. And I think that there's some really complex big ideas in this, and I want to
Hmm.
focus on those being the complicated part and
Right.
not the like
Like,
mechanics of
right. Did you remember your seed
digital
phrase? And
ownership.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I feel the same way. So, but again, if there's a story reason for it, then maybe,
Yeah,
right?
it's not off the table for
Yeah.
sure, but yeah.
Good. Cool. Okay. Well, um, yeah, I'm definitely going to kind of rewatch some of these things as well. I'm disappearing for the next 4 days into the wilderness, So I
Okay,
may
yeah,
not be
go
watching
for it.
anything in the next few days, but we can obviously
I'm
convene
out of town at the end of next week for
okay.
Comic-Con through the
Okay.
weekend.
Next week being like this upcoming week or
Yeah, starting Monday
right.
that
Okay.
week.
Yeah.
So next weekend I won't work for me.
Okay.
And so I'm out this next 7 days as well.
All
So
right.
let's try and figure out something for the following week.
Yeah.
And we'll get stuff like concretized in that meeting and written down and start doing some
Great.
of the
Real work.
real writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Or we actually
I looked at
right.
our schedule that we
Yeah.
initially proposed, and we're not nearly as behind as it feels like we are, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing was we didn't have that week, which was
Yes,
my fault.
yes,
But
that's okay.
maybe we, and as you said last week, and I talked with uh, Joshua about this. It gets done when it gets done. More important is good.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can find that time to do that week later when we're a little further along.
Hmm.
We'll see. But otherwise, we just keep trekking along, and yeah, I feel like this is exciting. I'm continually be excited about this.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Good
All right.
session.
Thanks. Yeah. Take care.
Bye.